Hello everyone. In this presentation, the life and mission of Reverend Myung Moon, Part 7, we look at True Father going on his world mission. We know that if Jesus was accepted in Israel at that time, he would have also travelled to the world. He would have went through to Rome, and through Rome to the world. But unfortunately in Jesus' time, he was not accepted, and he was died, crucified in Israel, and gave a promise that he would come again. The True Father came, and so he was destined to go to the world, and particularly America, and this was happened. When he came to America, he was accepted well, and he gave many speeches. He gave a great speech in Madison Square Garden in 1974. This is part of what he said. "Before I begin this evening's message, I would like to make one personal plea. I did not come here to repeat what you already know. I've come to reveal something new. I want to share with you a revelation from God." And then True Father, expounded the whole divine principle to the audience. And many people joined the Unification Church at that time. And young and old people were amazed at the deep truths he was revealing. Again in 1976 in Yankee Stadium, this is part of what he said: "God seeks to build one family of man. Therefore, the family, church, and nation which God desires transcend all barriers of race and nationality. The people who are a unified blending of all colours of skin and who transcend race and nationality are most beautiful in the sight of God and most pleasing to Him." And even in the same year, he gave even a bigger conference in Washington Monument in 1976. 300,000 people that came to that. That was a record at the time. It's the greatest attendance of any religious gathering. And this is part of what he said. "One world under God is the unchanging, eternal and absolute desire of God. This goal will be realized, yet in order to accomplish this goal, the unity of religions is the first and essential task. When all men worship one God as Father, accept one Messiah, and uphold one Godism, an absolutely God-centered way of life, then the dwelling of God will be with men." Now, True Father came as a Messiah. As a Messiah, as the second coming of Christ, his mission is to combat Satan, to expose Satan. And Satan works in many ways, basically, and particularly communism. People often get confused about what is Satan. Satan's biggest trick is to make people think he doesn't exist. And so he's destined to realize a world without God, and that's communism. Communism is a world that doesn't allow religious or belief in God. And so therefore, he organized a meeting in Yodo Island in 1976 in Korea. And this was attended by 1.2 million people. True Father spoke a message of determination to stand against communism in South Korea and establish a world centered on God at the height of the Cold War, during a time of great tension between North and South Korea. And Father, of course, he's come to work in every area of life. He built the Unification Theological Seminary. He really needed to educate people with God's words. Newspapers: News World Communications, 1976, News World, New York City Tribune, Noticiero del Mundo, Ultimas Noticias, the Middle East Times, Sekai Nippo, Sekio Times, and the Washington Times. At least 9 newspapers. But if we include everything that True Father did in his lifetime, we'll be all day. It's too much. I just want to point the things. But True Father worked in every area of life, in the arts, the media, and so on. Because his mission is to realize an ideal world, God's kingdom on his earth. Now, True Father met President Nixon. Why did Father meet President Nixon during the Watergate scandal? This is confusing to many people, I think, because President Nixon, he was a totally unpopular person at that time in the Watergate scandal. And people often get the wrong message, because people often want to connect with politicians for personal gain and so on. And Rev Moon was accused of this, but this is totally untrue. Nobody would really want to connect with President Nixon at that time. And it's a blog that explains this very clearly. I'll read this to you. In support of Nixon, Unification Church members prayed for 40 days and fasted for 3 days in front of the United States Capitol under this motto: forgive, love, and unite. On February the 1st, 1974, Nixon publicly thanked them for their support and officially received Rev Moon. During their historic meeting, Rev Moon appealed to the President to admit his fault in the Watergate scandal, humbly apologize to the American people, and stand strong in his position to protect the authority and credibility of the office of the presidency. He further warned Nixon that if he were to resign, the presidency would be weakened, and this would be taken advantage of by communist strategists in the Cold War era. Now, this was very clearly what True Father wanted. No personal gain. He wanted to save America. He wanted to, because President Nixon, although he did the wrong thing, basically, President Nixon really did understand about communism. He wrote books exposing their strategies. President Nixon was the person they needed at that time. And True Father really believed, if he humbly apologized to the people, that the American people would accept him. They'd be amazed at that. But he wouldn't do it, sadly. And then soon after, Nixon lost his presidency. Let's look now, 25 years later, just as a way of example. This is a different person. President Clinton. He actually repeatedly denied about his affairs with Monica Lewinsky. And he kept lying about it. The media, they knew it, but they kept on trying to bring it up constantly. But he actually, according to this newspaper article by Brian Knowlton, he did apologize to the people. I'll read it to you. President Bill Clinton declared somberly Friday that I have sinned in a speech so emotional and abject, including his first public apology to Monica Lewinsky and her family, that it brought a group of clergymen to their feet. The address was one of the most extraordinary ever given by this or any other president. I can think of no comparable speech to this, said Charles Jones, a former president of the American Political Science Association. Reading from notes, Mr. Clinton said he had scribbled down late the night before. He said he was a broken spirit. In slow, measured words, he added, I don't think there's a fancy way to say that I have sinned. It is important to me that everyone who has been hurt know that the sorrow I feel is genuine. First and most important, my family, my friends, my staff, my cabinet, Monica Lewinsky and her family, and the American people. I have asked all for their forgiveness. Now, he did exactly what True Father asked President Nixon to do 25 years earlier. But what happened? The people did accept President Clinton's apology, and they're moved by it, and he survived his presidency. So therefore, if President Nixon followed Father's advice, he would likely have survived his presidency, and history would have been different. So if True Father understood the reality of communism, they're trying to take over America. They were doing it in various ways. We have to realize at the time of the Cold War, approximately half the world was under communist control, or even more. The landmass, about half the world. So it's a very serious situation. Now, sadly, when President Nixon lost his presidency, we had President Carter and many left-wing presidents, and many countries fell to communism. But Father knew this, and this could have been prevented. I think it's very important to understand the Messiah comes as God's representative, is God's substantial body. So he has to confront Satan. And the communism was what Satan was using at that time. That's where Satan was. That's why Father's message when he came to America, everywhere, was against the extreme materialism. He's speaking against sexual immorality, because these two things really destabilized countries, and they ended up being communist in the end. The Messiah has to confront Satan no matter where he works. And Satan works in many forms. And this was Father's mission, to do this. And he was often misunderstood. Many people are against communism for wrong reasons, selfish reasons. Many fascist dictators and so on, many big businessmen didn't like communism for their own purposes. But True Father was against communism for one reason, because it's the enemy of God and humankind. Simply that. He came to champion God's ideal on his earth to save us. And exposing communism, exposing immorality, and guiding us into understanding God is a way of saving us. Anyway, thank you for hearing this presentation. We'll continue in the next presentation, part 8, where True Father, he eventually was accused of many things. The negativity continued in America, unfortunately, because the media earlier on in Korea were the slurs and the rumors, the newspapers, even though True Father was proved innocent. But when journalists, came to the attention of True Father, they wondered, they researched, and they often researched the media reports in Korea, even though they've been proven wrong, and they just resurfaced in the West. So a lot of persecution, misunderstanding happened in America, around the world. And this led to True Father ended up in Danbury prison. So we'll look at this in the next presentation. Thank you very much.